Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's YWCA Action Conversation on Protecting Democracy. My name is Adele Sholak. I am the Community Engagement Manager in the Center for Race and Gender Equity, and I am really excited to be here today with our moderator and our panelists. First, I wanted to thank our um, sponsors for today's action conversation. Highmark, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Allegheny Health Network. We thank you so much for your continued support. We wouldn't be here without you. I am always really excited when we have the opportunity to collaborate with other YWCAs, and Danielle, who's on the screen, Danielle Boyd, is joining us today from YWCA Columbus. And Danielle is a social impact leader, just across the board making change, but she is specifically the program manager in the Justice, Equity, and Belonging program at YWCA Columbus. YWCA Columbus is fantastic at actualizing our mission, our shared mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Welcome, Danielle. I'm so happy to have you here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to share I'm Danielle Boyd. I use both she and they pronouns. I'm a Black woman, mid 30s. I have short hair, and I am in a little bit of a ballroom, break room type space. I would like to guide our conversation today by inviting some of our panelists. I'm going to start with Dr. Ralph Bangs, who is the former Associate Director of the Center on Race and Social Problems at the University of Pittsburgh. We also have Lorraine Cross joining us. She's the board chair and civic engagement coordinator at BPEP, the Black Political Empowerment Project. And finally, we have Patrick Fisher, who serves as the CEO of the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. And so I want to thank them for joining us today. I know that they're going to have a lot of fruitful nuggets and really juicy bits for us to kind of dive into. I also want to share that the views of our guests don't necessarily represent YWCA as a nonpartisan organization, the sponsors, but we do welcome the expertise of our panelists and their opinions in the spirit of protecting democracy. And so I'll ask the panelists some questions that we have prepared, but I think it would be a little bit selfish for me to be the only one asking questions. And so I'm going to ask for our audience members to post questions in the comments section, and hopefully we can get to them so we can have your perspective as well. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to ask our panelists to take a couple minutes for each, but I'm going to pose this first question to all of our panelists. As I understand it, all of the action conversations start with inviting folks to share their personal connection to the topic as well as kind of introducing themselves. And so I'm going to ask that you all kind of introduce yourself and just give a small perspective about your connection to this work in the process.
Okay,
And I was going to say, and if we can start with Dr. Bangs here.
thank you. Ralph Bangs. I teach part-time for Pitt Osher, and my pronouns are he, him. And I'm wearing today a white short sleeve shirt, black pants. I have my glasses on, and behind me is a beautiful mural that we had painted on one of our walls in our living room.
Yeah. Lorraine, can we get you in there to introduce yourself and your connection to the work?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lorraine Cross, and I'm a Black woman in my early 70s. I have a short haircut with black and some reddish colored hair. I'm wearing a bright yellow dress with a multicolored necklace and a black sweater, and I have on some tortoise sun reading glasses. And my pronouns was she and her, and I'm in an office setting.
Lorraine, will you tell me a little bit about the connection to the work?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, I just want to mention that my family migrated from Georgia in the early 30s, and we migrated to the Hill District, and we lived with the Housey family up in the Hill District. And those from the Hill, we moved to Northview Heights, and those communities believed in raising the children. That's where the village began, and that's where my interest in community and democracy began because I was taught that through my family and nurturing within the community. And when I met Tim Stevens in 2005, I began working with him and Celeste Taylor, who mentored me and nurtured me and taught me about organizing, also about voter registration, mobilizing, and electoral protection. So this just increased my love for civil rights and fighting for our democracy became real personal to me.
Oh, thank you for that, Lorraine. Okay, Patrick, you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your connection to this work?
Yeah, thank you. Patrick Fisher. I am the CEO of the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, he, him pronouns. I am a white male in my early 40s with slightly scraggly hair tucked underneath a panel hat. I have a mustache and maybe a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. And my background behind me is a blurred hotel room, and I'm wearing a patterned button-up shirt. My relationship to this work is, I grew up in a very culturally homogeneous rural community that didn't have a lot of access to the arts and cultural expression. And when I was a teenager, I came across punk rock and DIY music spaces and really became heavily involved in that. And it was at a time when the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was occurring during the Bush administration. And a lot of the bands that I was engaging with in those DIY spaces were using their time on stage to speak out against political and social issues and atrocities, and started to realize about the power that artists have in being advocates against or for issues, as well as being a megaphone for the communities that they're a part of. Now, in my leadership role with the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, we work on behalf of those working within the cultural sector and arts ecosystem, many of whom are using their personal lived experiences and their personal perspectives and values and finding ways to integrate that into their work. And we strive to be supportive of them in creating conditions that allow them to create that work freely without being targeted, without being persecuted, without being threatened, so that we can ensure that the First Amendment is always a part of who we are as a functioning society.
I feel like I have already learned so much. I want to thank our panelists for their intros. And I am going to start with a conversation, sorry, a question for Dr. Baines, but really for any of our panelists. But Dr. Baines, as I understand it, you teach a class on authoritarianism. Are you seeing any signs of that happening in the United States? Where might you see it? And what can we do about it?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've taught three courses on authoritarianism last year and one more later this year. But I did an update in the last 24 hours to find the most current information from the main organizations that study democracy and authoritarianism in the US and around the world. And let me share what I found. Okay, so in the past, during Jim Crow, we had authoritarianism in relation to Black people, particularly in southern states. There's no doubt about that. There was a lack of civil rights, completely lack of freedom, and um, and so that was like stage one of authoritarianism in the U.S. Then, um, in 2020, we elected an administration that reduced democracy in America substantially and increased authoritarianism. Of course, both political parties had been passing policies, supporting policies that hurt the middle class, the working class, people with lower education, people in rural areas and small towns were hurt by these economic policies. And so that contributed to people wanting a strong leader who promised to fix things and sort of easy answers to our economic and social problems. So what happened from 2020 to 2024? There were major declines in democracy, as I mentioned. The FBI, the Justice Department, no longer had real independence from politics. They were used to attack opponents. The administration attacked the free press. And of course, the free press is important for democracy to function. People need good information, accurate information to make decisions for voting, for supporting policies, whatever. Um, and that administration created a voter fraud commission to try to cast doubt on elections, and that led to the January 6th event to try to stop the U.S. Congress from accepting the results of that 2024 election. Um, yes, and and okay, well, that was fast. Okay, and then in the current administration, there's a really good report out by Pew, a research organization called Multiple Indicators that show the decline of America's democracy. And they reviewed the major reports in the US and around the country. And let me give you the summary right now. Every major index on democracy and authoritarianism worldwide agrees that the US has these core problems: concentration of executive power, attacks on the rule of law, uh, attacks on court independence, pressure on the press and universities not to speak out and gather good information or share it, attacks on due process for immigrants who are legally in this country, and of course, destroying the independence of our voting and election system, such as the recent example of increasing gerrymandering. And so, we're not a full authoritarian state yet. We still have elections that remain contested, but that could change this November in the midterms. We still have some independent media, but those are being cut back by wealthy people and actions by the administration. And so independent media is being reduced. We have some courts pushing back. So the right now we could have a fair election in the midterms, but if we don't have a fair election, we probably have no chance of stopping America from slipping right into true authoritarianism. If we have a fair election this November, there's a good chance that we will elect people in Congress that can stop this backsliding on democracy. I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you for that, Dr. Baines. And if I didn't get anything else from that, it's a direct through line between policy and the impact on our communities. And so I'm going to come over to Miss Lorraine here, and I'm going to say that many people have expressed some concerns about racialized voter suppression, especially after the recent Supreme Court ruling. And so I'm curious to know, what does the lack of access to free and fair elections mean for the health of our democracy in the United States and in our communities?
Well, the health of democracy is measured by whether every eligible person can participate freely, safely, and equally in the political process. When access to free and fair elections are weakened, especially through racialized voter suppression, democracy itself is weakened. So, historically, in the United States, voter suppression has never affected all communities equally. The Black communities, the brown communities, Native communities, young voters, poor voters, elderly voters, and people with disabilities have always often faced the greatest barriers. Now, while the methods may have changed over time, like with the literacy test and the poll taxes, back in the Jim Crow era, and them purging the voter rolls and uh, polling places closing, the disinformation campaigns that we all heard about, and intimidation at the polls. We had restrictive ID laws, attack on mail voting, which is going on now, and also criminalizing voter assistance. The impact is often the same. Reducing this reduces political participation among communities whose voices threaten existence by power structure. So you'll see that when that confidence is lost in their voice and whether or not their voice matters, you'll see that uh, several dangerous things begin to happen. And a lot of people felt that that's what was happening during this primary election. The civic trust had eroded. Participation had declined. There was low voter turnout. Um, Extremism grows stronger, and communities we become disconnected from the government, and then the public policy becomes less representative of the people. So a democracy can't truly function when some people experience voting as a right, while others experience as an obstacle course. We had a lot of problems with that. That some of our monitors that went out were concerned that polling locations were not identified clearly. You didn't know where you were going. And then there were locations that had changed, and people felt that they weren't notified, early enough for that change. So a democracy can't truly function when some people are disproportionated and marginalized voters feel that there are fewer safeguards against discrimination. So this is not only just a legal issue; it becomes a moral and civic issue. And so I believe that free and fair elections are the mechanism through which people peaceably resolve their differences. We hold our leaders accountable and shape the future of our communities. And if these barriers prevent equal participation, then democracy risks becoming less about representation and more about maintaining power for those who are already empowered. And at the same time, history also shows that communities have always respond in grassroots voter education. We upped our election protection efforts. We provide transportations to the polls, language access, legal advocacy. We engage our youth voters, and community-based participation remains critical tools for democracy. So democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires active participation and collective responsibility. Ultimately, the question is not simply whether uh, elections occurred. The question is whether every person has a genuine equal opportunity to participate without fear, discrimination, or unnecessary barriers. And when that principle is threatened, the health of democracy is threatened as well.
Mm, thank you for that. And I am just really reminded about that phrase being disconnected from government or disconnected from our government, and that making the idea of representation dubious, right?
Right.
Okay, Patrick, I'm gonna come over to you. So you made the argument that when the arts are under attack, democracy is at risk, and so I wanted to know if you would explain to us the relationship between democracy and the arts, as well as why like authoritarian regimes will target our artists and creatives in our communities.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I also want to just share how sobering it was to hear what Dr. Bangs expressed about November being such an inflection point.
Hmm.
Recognizing that this potential rise of authoritarianism or full-fledged rise of authoritarianism in our own country is just, at an inflection point just a few months from now. In that regard, you know, in the world of free creative expression and the right that protects creative expression, seeing that silenced is incredibly troubling. Seeing moral implications applied to works of art is incredibly concerning. If we look in other rises of authoritarianism, not only was the press and media targeted, but artists were also targeted, right? Works of literature, paintings, other forms of music were all targeted, and moral judgments were applied to them that essentially put the artists that made that work at risk. In Pittsburgh, we have a tremendous organization called City of Asylum, which has given refugee to writers who, in their own countries, were targeted and at risk because of the things that they created and the criticisms that they maybe applied to either their government or their commentary on social issues. And so, in our community as a democratic society, press and media and artists are all really important because they can verbalize or demonstrate in other mediums dissent, right? And critical thinking and uplift different perspectives. And when we see authoritarianism at a rise, what's typically being pursued is a flattening of a narrative, a narrowing of a perspective, and really trying to homogenize what it means to be human, what it means to be a part of a community, and making it a very binary situation. So, artists are truth tellers in our communities, whether they are writing songs like the folk and protest movement during the Great Depression, whether they're creating works like we saw in paintings and theater during the Black Lives Matter movement in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. But artists are inherently making political work. And when they are being targeted because of that work, because somebody disagrees with the stance they're taking, that is incredibly troubling. And when we see a state takeover of places where the arts typically are shared with the broader community, that is equally concerning, right? Right now, having the Kennedy Center, not only renamed, but the board completely rebuilt. And that board applying moral judgment to what should and should not be shared in that place. In states like Florida, where you have books being banned because they are perceived as having immoral ideologies being expressed in them. When you're seeing visual artists no longer be able to apply and receive funding through places like the National Endowments for the Arts because the work they're doing has an ideology associated with it. These are all forms of both covert and overt suppression of artistic works. And the more we flatten the narrative to only allow one singular form of art or art that agrees with a moral ideology, the more we are seeing democracy truly at risk.
Thank you for that, Patrick. It seems like, and Patrick, you mentioned that we are seeing both covert and overt attacks. It seems like we are kind of facing battles on multiple fronts. And so this question is for everybody. When it comes to protecting our democracy and knowing that some of these things are being under attack, are there some areas that we are not paying attention to, or some areas that we should probably give a little bit more kind of support to in the way of protecting our democracy, or even sharing the message to say to our community, there are some things at stake here. We must act on it. Oh, Dr. Bangs, I think you actually placed yourself on mute.
Oh, there we go.
Mhm.
I would just repeat what comment Patrick made in response to my comments that this midterm elections this November is critical. That's sort of the last big thing that we can directly influence
Mhm.
to save the democracy and not let it turn into a true authoritarian state.
Yeah.
And so anything we can do to elect people who will be our real representatives and not just represent wealthy people, wealthy corporations, or people who want a dictator or autocrat or authoritarian state. Um, that's really sort of the most important thing right now. Of course,
Mhm.
speaking up, organizing, that can be part of it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Ms. Lorraine, I'm going to ask that you tell us a little bit more about what's happening on the grassroots level in terms of being prepared for our next elections and what we're going to do to position ourselves to maintain our protections and increase protections of our democracy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bang and Patrick, for your comments and the notice that it is a critical time, and that there are things that we have to take this election very very serious, and we are preparing by organizing with um, multiple organizations. Right now, we belong to a group called VIP, uh, Voting is Power, and that's a Pittsburgh regional organization. And that's probably about 31 or more different organizations um, that meet every other week. And we just recently put on 3 forums uh, in, uh, in the primary to educate and to encourage the community to come out and vote and to be more knowledgeable about who they're voting for. Now, we are going to be meeting and preparing on how to get people more engaged. On I think it's July 17th is the John Lewis Day of Action, and July 17th and July 18th we will be having a session over in North Park, West Park on the north side, and also in Wilkinsburg. And that is a day where we'll be promoting voting and the John Lewis Act and engaging the community to come out and understand more about the importance of democracy. So our organization will be going throughout this year, this election period, uh, doing more things to get the community out and definitely educating the importance, even though this primary was sort of dismal and very quiet. We have to sound the drums. We have to sound the alarm of the importance of what's going on. So that's what we'll be working on, making sure that people are educated and motivated and pass the word to get out and vote.
Absolutely. We got to make those well-informed decisions. Dr. Bain, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No,
Okay.
nothing to add.
Okay. Patrick, did you want to get in there?
Yeah, just, one, double down on what Dr. Bangs and Miss Lorraine shared, but also showing up for the communities and the organizations and the individuals that are on the front line of the work and who are actively demonstrating resistance.
Hmm.
Speaking specifically about the arts, there are organizations that have been cut off from federal funding to support their work because they are remaining committed to presenting work that is holistic to the communities that we serve as arts organizations and as artists, and are committed to equity in their work, are committed to serving not only members of the LGBTQIA community, but also uplifting Black and Brown perspectives and voices. Those are organizations like Kelly Strayhorn Theater. There are organizations like True Tea Studios. I already mentioned City of Asylum earlier. But there are many within the greater Pittsburgh region that are still doing the work, regardless of no longer having a pathway to federal support for that work. And if we value that work, if we feel it is important to be a part of our social and cultural fabric as a community, it's also important that we support those organizations and the artists creating the work for those organizations to ensure that it doesn't go away in this critical moment.
Mm.
I would just like to add two comments to Lorraine's point about election work and Patrick's point about different types of resistance. One is that we all need to speak up to change, to try to affect this polarization and hate that's going on. Whenever people around me say that, oh, it's all Republicans' fault or it's all Democrats' fault, I remind them that both parties, different types of political people, have contributed to our problems. And the second thing is that the elections work, the resistance work is critical, but all of us uh, already know that there are a lot of people struggling and economically with food, housing, healthcare, whatever. And and we need to help those people along. And that reinforces the not only is doing good, but it reinforces the idea that this is a community. We should care about each other and help out.
Absolutely. And that point about everyone contributed to our problems, we are all responsible for fixing them, right? We are all still in
Mhm.
community. I'm going to ask some more questions, but I'm going to invite our audience members to get in there as well. But I'm curious to know a little bit about some of the changes you all have seen historically speaking. And so I'm curious to know what has kind of been a catalyst that you think has encouraged folks to either stay or remain engaged or get engaged when they have noticed some disenfranchisement or maybe some attacks on democracy. And anybody can get in there.
I'll jump in, on the topic of getting engaged. Uh, there's a great organization that does national work called the Center for Artistic Activism, and they really they work across a number of different social issues, and they work to empower communities around the topics that are most important to them. But one of the topics that has been a consistent through line in their work has been about voter rights, voter turnout, voter engagement. And one of the things that, if you ever go through their training, they start with is like, what is that curb moment for you, right? When did you step off the curb and go from being passive to being active? And in a lot of our work, when we're, advocacy organizations in particular, we think it's, it's the data, it's the reports, it's the slogans, it's all of these things that fuel the action. It's these things, these materials that fuel the work. But oftentimes when you hear people sharing their curb moments, it's far different. It's those things that were personal, those things that were felt closely because they were proximate to them. And so when thinking about what gets people engaged and keeps them engaged, it's when they have a personal connection to them, right? And that's why I personally feel that for me and my staff and my board, we have to be proximate to these issues. We have to be in conversations with the folks that are being impacted by this work, because if there's distance between us and them, then we're obviously disconnected and we're not equipped to be able to do the work that we need to do. So being active, being engaged, I think it's really proximate and being personal.
I agree with those points that Patrick made, and I would just add that there's a large group of people in America that don't really value or place very highly democracy or even truth. They're more concerned about daily living, um, income, security, um, the cost of living, and so on, right? And so the research and also the recent elections are fairly clear that if politicians or leaders can connect the people on those bread and butter issues, those kitchen table issues, they will get more support. Some people just don't put a priority on democracy or truth, but there are many people who do, but there's a large segment who don't, and they have these bread and butter issues foremost in their minds.
Hmm. Thank you for that, Dr. Bangs.
I agree with Patrick and Dr. Bangs on those points. Um, I, I believe as Patrick said, it has to be there's that connection, okay, that personal connection that keeps people engaged, and we'll see that when it starts affecting people personally, when their children are no longer safe in school. Um, their neighborhoods is not receiving the investments that other neighborhoods are receiving for growth and building. When women do not have protection over their bodies, um, that's when people start saying, "Look, I have to get involved. I have to get engaged. It matters to me," and that's the point that we have to get across to people that it might not be affecting you right now, but pinch by pinch and little by little, it starts eroding your future. So you have to become connected and stay connected. Um, the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, the labor movement, all these things took place during my time, the Voting Rights Act, and I grew up being a part of those movements. And so they personally connected me and affected me on what I feel we need to do about our democracy. So I really think that if we don't get these points across to people now, we will definitely suffer
Yeah.
in the
I would,
future.
I would, I would like to add one point.
Hmm.
I agree with that, but one additional point is that I think one of the things that we've learned from elections in the U.S. in the last 10 years is that a number of people have felt neglected by both political parties and that
Hmm.
people didn't care for them or their problems. And so they were looking for, or they latched onto a strong man who promised to care about them
Yeah.
and be on their side, right? So
Hmm.
showing, authentic, legitimate concern for people's issues and being close to them and caring for them and have a connection to them is part of what we've been saying, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been saying, but uh, have we been getting that across? And you made an excellent point. I mean, when somebody comes out with gold tennis shoes and people are like, "Yay!" and the young people feel, really like excited that this person is about us and for us. So we have to look at what we're doing and what we're actually saying. I found that whenever we did voter registration in Allegheny County Jail with the League of Women Voters and different organizations. That was some of the things that even the young inmates was saying. Oh no, hey, he thinks about us, he cares about it. There's things that's gonna be changed. And so I think our whole message, in connecting with our young voters and getting people to feel connected, it has to change. We have to deliver a different message than just go vote. We have to make that connection.
Well, what I would add to that, and I agree with that, the other thing I would add to that is that there have been a lot of promises made that haven't been kept. I'm going
Yeah.
to end the Ukraine war on day one. I'm going to reduce prices, da 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 da. So there are big lists of promises that haven't been fulfilled, even close. Some big things have been fulfilled by the current administration, but many have not. So that, you know, we need to help people realize that a lot of promises are empty and even on the surface are sort of impossible to do immediately. The second thing is that these shiny objects, like the promised gold-plated phone, um, you know, a lot of those things turn out to be sort of fake. The $100, deposit wasn't real a deposit, and it wasn't made in the U.S., but it was promised that it would be made in the U.S. So these authoritarian leaders make a lot of promises that they can't fulfill, and they make a lot of mistakes in what they do. They have overreach, and a lot of corruption occurs. So there's a lot of problems that develop that we can focus on, but still, probably the majority of people want to be cared about and listened to and and helped, rather than general democracy general politics issues. They want people to care about their personal issues.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Dr. Bangs. If I didn't see anything else, no one is coming to save us. We gotta do it. So I'm gonna pose this final question and then we'll get into the chat. So we're gathered here as a part of the monthly action conversations. And so these sessions really are supposed to inspire some action in support of the mission of YWCA, eliminating racism and empowering women. And so what is one tangible thing that our audience members can do to protect democracy, especially in this critical moment that you all highlighted?
I guess the one thing I would repeat is we can all speak up against hate and lies every day. We see that around us. Besides the obvious work on elections and resistance and so on, um, I would like us to do more to stop this polarization.
Yeah. Anyone else have a tangible action step maybe that we can take?
I I I would like to see people become more actively involved in voting, and also trying to remove those barriers that prevent people from participating in voting. And as I said before, I think that encouraging and capturing our young voters, and as Dr. Bang has said before, and making it feel personal. We need to change our dialogue on how we address the importance of voting, so that we can make sure that they understand that they have more future ahead of them than I do. So they have to understand it is their future that lies in the balance of things. And if we can encourage more people to get out and vote, I think that would be a tangible thing.
Thank you. Patrick, anything you think might be tangible for us to get our hands on and kind of activate?
Yeah, I think continue to uphold, uplift, and protect truth and really take a stance against revisionist history. If folks feel comfortable, utilizing their voice and their ability to write, to share letters with the editor, opinion pieces, recognizing the opportunity to call into question when facts are being conveyed that are not actually facts, and just using the First Amendment that we all have in this present moment to really speak out against things that are not only unjust but simply not true as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to go to our chat and read some of our questions here. So any of our panelists can hop in here. What are some models of organizing and or what organizations from the past can we study to resist authoritarianism today?
Well, we have legal action against authoritarians is still possible in the U.S. And so is, the Southern Poverty Law Center, ACLU, and many others that are taking legal action. And some of the courts are holding up that legal act, supporting that legal action. So contributing to those types of legal organizations that are actively resisting authoritarianism is really important.
Mm, thank you for that. Anyone else have any models of organizing methods or even organizations that we might be able to learn some lessons from?
Yeah, there's an organization called the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. Even though it sounds like a government agency, it is actually an independent nonprofit. And they've been doing a lot of work similar to the Center for Artistic Activism to really ensure that they are protecting creative expression and the freedom of it, and doing so as resistance to the rise of authoritarianism. I think that they're work and the ways that they are reaching out and collaborating with others is really important, but also the ways that they are potentially reaching younger audiences that have maybe the past efforts, past campaigns maybe haven't resonated with. including creating like graphic novels about anti-authoritarianism. Which is another great organization doing really good work.
Mm, thank you for that.
Okay. I think one important model is the civil rights model. And leaders like Fannie Lou Hamer, I'm
Mm,
sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm about sick and tired of being sick and tired right now. And also and John Lewis, that they understood that democracy is strengthened through grassroots organization and organizing, voter education, coalition building, and sustaining nonviolent resistance. So they all fought, literacy tests, voter intimidation, and police violence and institutional racism, um, while they were building community based leadership. So I think that that is a key lesson uh, to the movement when leadership is decentralized and ordinary people are empowered
mm.
to act.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I want to go back to Patrick. We had some questions in the chat that asked about some other ways that artists are organizing and pushing back on the suppression of artistic works or artistic voices.
Yeah, I mean, I think continuing to do the work regardless. Again, I'll uplift organizations like Kelly Strayhorn Theater, right? When you have built into your mission as an organization a commitment to promoting and uplifting and supporting the work of Black and Brown artists, queer artists, and despite the intimidation that is being presented through the federal government, still pursuing that work because it's what your mission calls you to do. Another great example locally would be One Hood Media and the work that they do to really progress towards the liberation of Black and Brown people. And so there's a tremendous amount of arts organizations nationally, but also in our community, that just by continuing to do the work is resistance. And continuing to be present in their communities despite the narratives that are out there right now is a form of resistance. And so we'd love to uplift all of their work. As I mentioned earlier too, at a national level, at an organizing level, at a coaching and training level, Center for Artistic Activism and the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, I think, are also really great models.
Let me mention one other thing. Um, the other thing that we don't talk enough about is that the excessive policing of Black people in Black neighborhoods and the mass incarceration of Black people creates sort of a permanent state abolitionist, permanent authoritarian state for Black people, and we don't do enough to stop the racism that's rampant in policing, prosecution efforts, the courts, and so on. The Abolitionist Law Center is a local leader in the Pittsburgh area, as is the ACLU in Pittsburgh, and so we have this anti-black as black racism throughout American society, but in criminal justice. We don't focus on that enough, and that's one of the biggest destroyers of black communities. And so there's no real democracy there if
Mhm.
there's massive discrimination throughout that one system, criminal justice, plus other systems. So we can't forget that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have another question in the chat, and it says, what do you say to those who are disillusioned, those who don't believe that voting will transform the United States from its genocidal origins, as well as some of the things that we see present day?
Mm.
Let me comment on that.
Hmm.
So we didn't have we've never really had a pure democracy throughout our history.
Hmm.
Elites, wealthy people, corporations have had excessive political influence throughout our history. So it's not just that we want to stop authoritarianism. we want to do better than that. If we can stop authoritarianism, then we have to try to make a better democracy than we had before. So we need to keep that in mind.
Mhm. Anyone else have any responses to folks who may not believe that their vote is as impactful?
Mhm. Well,
It's okay, Lorraine. You don't have to struggle through it. I was actually struggling through it myself, because it is really important for us to remain engaged and involved, especially because these are the systems that we have to work with, right? And if we cannot completely overhaul a system, we have to figure out how we're going to navigate or work within it. Patrick, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, it's a big important question, right? And the truth is, in this present moment, it's really challenging to remain hopeful or optimistic, right?
Mhm.
But we still need to do the work in spite of that. And as Dr. Bang said, it's not just about defending the line of democracy. It can't just be about holding the line. In this present moment, we really have to be future building. If we are only recognizing the threat of a failing democracy because it's now impacting folks that look like me, white privileged men, if we're only defending the line of democracy now, and we're not actually acknowledging how it's failed so many for so long and actually building something more just, then I think we will continue to um, fall short of reaching folks that feel disenfranchised by the current system and the current conflict. So this present moment can't just be about defending the line. It really has to be about future building.
Mm. Thank
So
you
I
for
just
that.
and
want
one,
Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing because um, this feeling didn't just begin, and it really affects me personally and a lot of people that I know because during my mother's time and her mother's time, they fought, they struggled, they made sure that they thought that when their children grew up, they wouldn't have to go through what they were going through. And so now here we are fighting for our children not to go through what they went through and to sit here and know that it's back in our face. It's hard. It's hard to say, I understand how you feel. It's very frustrating, but to know that we have to continue to fight and to make sure that everybody understands the importance of it, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. So that's what took me uh, just a minute to even gather myself because this has been a hard time.
Mm.
And it has been discouraging and frustrating when you're speaking to your children and their children, and then you're speaking to the young people, and trying to make them understand it's about you. It's about you, and we have to be connected about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That was a good question. That was.
Dr. Baines, did you have something you wanted to round us out with?
No, I think Patrick and Lorraine said it all. So on that issue, so I don't need to talk.
Well, I want to thank everybody for bringing their lived experience, expertise, and perspectives to this conversation. I have maybe 4 or 5 little nuggets that I wrote down here, and I really appreciate even the perspective of this being multidisciplinary, right? Sometimes people are like, well, what do artists have to do with democracy, right? And so thinking about what the future artists, organizers, and even what the future of the Academy will say about us in this time has been weighing on me heavy, but I know that we are headed in the right direction if we remain engaged. And so I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us here for this conversation. And I also wanted to alert you all to all of the great resources resources and nuggets that are located in the chat, as well as links to organizations that will help you continue your justice journey and do this work as we really think about our democracy and how we experience it. I want to thank y'all for bringing the perspective. This conversation was informative, of course, as well as very inspiring. And I also want to invite you all to join YWCA Greater Pittsburgh next month on June 17th. I understand it. They will have some panelists joining from the Women's Law Project that will discuss the role of the courts in the fight for equality. And so I know that that conversation is sure to be a good time. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining, as well as the audience. That chat has all the resources and features. So feel free to share that with your networks and out in the community, as well as revisiting this conversation as often as you see fit to remain engaged or borrow some of those nuggets and methods. But I'm going to end there and thank you all again for this very fruitful conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.